Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy, brought to you by Cative Technologies. I'm Nigel Mbai, Customer Success Manager here at Cative, and today we've got
Ryan Mokelman, also Customer Success Manager here at Cative Technologies.
This is a double customer success webcast. I'm really excited for this, Brian. We've been talking about doing this for a while. Brian's gonna, show some cool iPart functionality within Inventor. For those of you who don't know, iParts is not an Apple product. It is indeed a Inventor functionality that Brian's going to go ahead and show us all today. If you do have any questions, go ahead and type those into the Zoom questions panel at any time. We'll go ahead and answer those for you. Also, stay tuned for some really cool announcements for some sessions happening here in the next couple of weeks. I'm sure those of you who are on the webcast and using things like Inventor, AutoCAD, and Vault might have gotten a couple of emails over the last couple of days stating some really exciting news. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my good friend here, Brian, and we're going to get started with the webcast today.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Nigel.
Yep.
So what exactly is an iPart? So iParts is a master part or a factory file, some may call it, with parameters of different sizes and features. And they pretty much drive the different variations of your model, whether it's the size of the hole, the length, the width, the radius of the fillet, if it even has a fillet, or if it even has holes, or the number of holes. Anything that has a parameter or any feature that you can toggle on and off can be done with inside of iParts. And why are we concerned with iParts? So the reason we are taking a look at this today is so we can help you guys save time. And you can save time by reusing the parts that you already have created with iParts. You can, like I mentioned earlier, change some of the dimensions. You can change some of the features. So you don't have to necessarily go back and do that manually on your own or start anything from scratch. If you have a similar design, but you just need to tweak something here and there, iParts is perfect for that. And it also helps to increase design consistency. So since you don't have to go through the hassle of creating it over again, that'll eliminate the potential human error that could be made by messing around with sketches and dimensions and things like that. So today we'll be creating this canopy leg with iParts, and the holes in this leg here represent like the different heights you can adjust the canopy at, and that could be something that we can use an iPart to be built around. And once again, just a reminder to leave those questions in the Zoom meeting. And either myself, Nigel, or our other colleague, Jessica, will be taking a look at that, and we will be answering most of them at the end of the webinar. Let's hop on over here to Inventor, and let's go ahead and create a new part. I'll go ahead and start creating the leg of the canopy here. And I'm going to create parameters inside of my dimension itself. One called width, and I'll have another one called length. I'll give it the same number there, just in case we want to change that later. And then I'll give this a thickness of, let's put THK for thickness, of about 0.1 of an inch there. So now we can go ahead and extrude this out. A height parameter of, let's say, 3 feet.
And we're done.
And we're done.
Podcast over.
And we have to create those holes, right? So then we can adjust it accordingly. And not everything needs a parameter, just the ones that you want to adjust. Another parameter here. So a lot of parameters everywhere. And we can either have use the hole command, or in this case, I'm just going to do an extrude cut. And this is one of my favorite tools here. It's extent 2. So it'll cut to this face. So if the thickness, if we happen to change the thickness later on, it'll adjust accordingly. And lastly, we'll do a pattern of this hole feature, or the cut here. Let's do 4 holes about 2 inches apart. Now we're done, almost. So now we just have a part, not an iPart yet. I'll go ahead and save that for now. Saving is a good habit. This is just a numbering scheme I have as a part of from my vault. It numerically numbers it. That's another can of worms. So I just saved my part number 44. And now to make it an iPart, we go over here to the Manage tab. We can just take a look at our parameters here. See that all of our parameters that we created are located here, and the ones that we didn't create a parameter for is notated as like a D4, D5. And to make the iPart, we just go over here under Author and hit Create iPart. And now it gives us the iPart Author window, which gives us a table that we can add more variables to or subtract from, where we can customize or drive our master part. So to keep this simple, I'll go ahead and get rid of some of these. I didn't actually create the one for the rectangular pattern here. So let me just go back here and turn this one into a parameter as well. Let's see, num holes, number of holes equals to 4. So now when I go back to my iPart here, let's see, I want to leave the height in and the number of holes. I'll take out the hole diameter. So now we can, right now we only have one member, I guess, or one row here. So one variation of the part. If I want to add more, I can just right click on that row and insert more. And I want to specify the different ones by the name. So the first one, let's call this a small member. And then it's going to give us a warning of, hey, you changed the name. This is going to change the file name for it. That's okay. And I'll go ahead and leave that at 3 feet with 4 holes. Then we'll create another one over here. And this one will be 4 feet with 8 holes. And if you can guess it, change this one to large. Oops, I'm putting number. Rhymes sort of with number. And this one will be 5 feet with 12 holes, just so you can have more adjustability. All right, so once you're done with that, everything's in order, go ahead and hit OK. And it will create a table for you at the top left-hand corner of the screen under your Model tab with the different iPart members. And let's test to see if it went through here. So let's see the medium member. It seemed to have extended it to 4 feet with 8 holes. And then double click for the large member for 5 feet with 12 holes. So now that I confirm that those are indeed correct here, we can go ahead and select these. And we want to generate these parts, because right now these are all presiding inside number 44, part 44 here. But we want to generate, right click and generate these files. So then if we take a look at, let's see here, where's my file explorer? This is where I store all my data, number 44 here. So this, if you take a look here, this isn't the part itself. The part itself is number 44 down below here. That's the master part. this is the folder that contains the iParts that we just created. And just keep in mind, these parts aren't the ones that we want to be putting into assemblies or sending to other people. You want to send still or insert the master part that's at this folder level down below here instead. So when you insert this into an assembly, for example, then it will prompt you for what size of the part 44 that you want to bring in.
Yeah. So just to reiterate that, right, is we have the iPart members inside of this folder in which the master part is referencing. So you want, like Brian said, you want to put the master part in every assembly that you use. That's the only way you're going to be able to get those options to use A, B, or C in terms of the members for that file.
Exactly.
Hopefully that makes sense.
And let's go ahead and show you guys. So we'll start a new assembly. And then we'll place part or number 44. And this is the master part. And we can choose from different ones to insert. Right now, we'll go ahead and insert the small member. I can toggle in a window here to insert the medium one. And then the large one, of course. Oh, there are all the different variations of your part there. And now let's say you want to make a change to this part. You want to, the customer or the designer wants to add a fillet to this part. We can just go back to the master part here. Just gonna add a fillet to one of these edges here. And then if I go ahead and take a look at the assembly here, it's gonna give me this local update icon with that thunderbolt. I'm gonna go ahead and hit that because it realizes that now a fillet is added to this part here. And if you just want a fillet to be on the medium and the large canopy leg and not the small one, you can control that as well. So if I go back to my part, I go to the iPart author under suppression, and I'm gonna bring over the fillet that I just created to something that's controllable inside my table. And I will type in suppress. And that will go ahead and suppress it in my small member. So now if I go back to the assembly, that update is there again. Now you can see that this small member has no fillet, but the medium and large do. All right. And another thing I wanted to add to this is if a customer or the designer wants to control the leg even more, they want to control exactly the number of holes. They don't want to just go with the default 4, 8, and 12, as well as controlling the length of it. They don't want just 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet. They might want 3 1/4 or 3.5 feet. So what you can do for that is create a custom iPart. And to create a custom iPart, you can begin creating your part like we did earlier. So I have this part 51 here that I created earlier, and it's on its way to become an iPart, or it is an iPart, but it's on its way to be completely populated. And we take a look here in the tables. I'll go ahead and first add the number of holes over, as well as the height again. What we can do to make it customizable is we can right click on the column that we want to give the user customizability by going under here to custom parameter column, and it'll make it purple, but now they have the ability when inserting into their assembly to change this value, and they can change it within a range you specify. So for example, I don't want them to have less than 4 holes, but I don't want them to have more than 12 holes. And you can specify the increment for it. So they are not putting half of a hole or 4.5 of a hole. And same goes for the height. I'm going to specify the range. It can only be between 3 feet and 5 feet. And we can also see that we didn't have to put in the IN there, it populated that for us. And we're going to specify the increment for the column. So it's not going to be 44 and a quarter inches. It'll just go up and down by 1. All right. And lastly, I do want to name this a different name, maybe add a 0 for it. And what this will do is every time it increases the, or every time we create a new part with a different, with a custom number of holes and a custom height, it will keep adding a different member name. So it would go from part 51-0, maybe 0, to part 51-01, 02, etc. All right, so now let's go ahead and test that. So we go over here to assembly 11, and we want to put in the part. It'll be part 51. And I put it at, it's just going to be part 51 for now. This was something I messed around with earlier, so don't mind that. My numbering scheme, if you guys have numbering schemes from Vault, is appearing again. We're going to want to skip this because this will override the naming convention that I want for this. And now it's going to be part 51-0. And I'm going to be able to specify. Now we have 2 boxes here. I could specify in this box the number of holes I want, as well as the height. So we can make it at 3.5 feet with 9 holes. Now, if I place that in there, I'll go ahead and save that. We can see that this is the 3.5 feet, and there should be 9 holes there. And let's just do that one more time so I can show that inside of here, it's going to be the -0. Might be, sorry if it's a little hard to understand there because of the other 2 ones. But I can go ahead and bring in part 51 again, skip the numbering scheme, maybe add another hole and make this. So if I try to type in maybe 39 inches, if I try to type in like a 1/2 inch here, it should disallow it when I select out of here. It's going to probably round up. There we go, because I set the incremental value to 1. And now this should be the different, it had an extra hole here, and I changed the length a little bit. And then if we take a look at the File Explorer, we should see 51-01. There you go. Yep. So we just did this part here and that part there. All right. So now let's take a step back and take a look at the part, the standard iPart that we created earlier with the small, medium, and large member. And now let's say we want to send this out to manufacturing and we want to show the different iParts in a drawing, perhaps. So Inventor is smart enough to see that there are different, or it's smart enough to bring over the values that we created in here into our drawing environment. So if let's go ahead and create a new drawing here. And now if I go to annotate, and instead of creating a parts list, we're going to go ahead and click general, or create a general table. Select the view we want to create the table for. And then before we place that table, I'm going to add the different features that I want to see in this table. Place that table in there. And now we have a table that populated with the member name and those other variables as well. So, and I don't like the UL here, so I'll go ahead and I can always edit the table. And I'll go ahead and make that unit less without the unit string. So now I have the number of holes as a clean 4, 8, and 12. All right. So that's essentially it. We went over let's go back to the PowerPoint here. We created the parameters as we designed the model. We can always open the parameters window to edit or create the variable name in there. We created the members, or we managed the features in the iPart author window. We created a custom iPart. We can go deeper into the custom iPart another time. If you guys have any questions on that, feel free to let us know. But there's more to that. This was just a higher level of how those work. We inserted iParts into the assembly and just make sure that you insert the master one, not the generated members. And lastly, we brought the iPart into the drawing environment and showed how to show the different table values for each feature, and we can toggle which ones you want to show, of course. So those are our email addresses. We always like receiving emails from you guys, and any questions or anything like that. I think that's a good time to go over right now.
Yeah, so there's some questions here, Brian. We'll go ahead and answer these. There's a ton coming in. For all of those people who are asking questions, keep doing so. We'll get through them. First question from Corey. What has been the experience with modifying iParts that are in Vault? It's very specific, the way that Vault manages these iParts. There is a big old white paper on it from Autodesk. If you are using Vault and you are using iParts, make sure you read that and understand how that works. Generally, it starts getting a little messy if you have iAssemblies, iParts, and you start going like multiple levels deep of stuff. You might have some issues in that case. If you are, if it's like super deep and you got like 3 or 4 levels of automation through iParts and iAssemblies, but if you're using some other ways to automate that, it's a lot easier. So Corey, if you have any questions about that, let us know. We can answer those. When's it better to use iParts versus custom content center parts?
So I got this, I was having this conversation with one of our colleagues, Matt Bussey, yesterday. He's one of the creators he helped create the iParts actually itself from Autodesk. And he was telling me that for iParts, anything that's more custom, because content center parts, you have to author them before you bring them into the content center. So you need to define what kind of part it is. And so if you can't completely author your part, then iPart would be the better way to go. Like if there's no exact definition of what you're looking for inside of the content center where you're trying to author, then you'd create an iPart for it. But if there is, then if you can author inside of content center, then that's then you can go that route as well. I like to call iParts more of like a more custom, or semi-customizable, so you can change the dimensions and features. Whereas content center, they're kind of more of off-the-shelf custom parts that you already like saved and put into content center. Like the iParts that I showed today, the 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, those could potentially be saved maybe as like a tube or something like that inside of content center, but we would have to author it accordingly. But once that's authored, then you don't have to really need that iPart as much anymore, except for like if you want to create more of them. But then you would have that inside of content center and you'd be good to go. So you kind of both are beneficial. Depends the scenario that you're trying to use it for.
Yeah. So in that case, I think I can reiterate that in a few shorter words than Brian can. Use custom content, use content center parts when it makes sense. When the part is going to be static, it's not really going to change. When you have each, I guess, configuration of the part, when those don't change, obviously. That's where I would use content center parts. as opposed to iParts. I personally use iLogic over iParts for the most part, and I can kind of go over a little bit of that. There are some questions where I think going over that might be beneficial to answer them. So let me go ahead and continue down the list. Member versus part number has always confused me. Member equals file name. Can you explain the difference? Yeah, so it's the same thing, right? Member does equal file name, part number does equal part number. Those are two different properties in your Inventor files. I saw Brian type in the member name as the equivalent part name or the part number. You don't have to do that. Just something that Brian did on this.
Yeah, for like the custom one I did, I left the part number as is because that one you actually want the part number to be the same across the board, whereas the member you want that to change because that's where the different lengths came in. But for the part number, that's where it was the same part. It's just changing in terms of the lengths and the holes, I guess.
Exactly. So I think I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on some of the stuff that we went through today, and why Brian kind of went over some of the stuff in iParts today, as opposed to using something like iLogic to control all of these part names. When you've got something like relatively simple, you don't have to combine a bunch of different ones together, right? It's kind of like a one-off thing. Sure, use iParts. But when you start having to, when you want to start automating like an entire assembly, I'd start using iLogic to do that instead of iParts. So iParts, he's generating like all of the different members, right? So say, for example, you have a component that has 50 different configurations, right? Whether that configuration is length, height, number of holes, et cetera, et cetera. And in an iPart, you have to generate 50 files. If you're using iLogic to generate or to change those parameters, you actually only kind of have one file, and then you just generate those files as needed when you're generating that assembly or that part using some of the parameter manipulation. So depending on what you're trying to do, iParts could be the right thing, and then start leveraging some of the iLogic stuff could be an answer to a couple of different scenarios. I would say most of the time when we're dealing with a lot of our customers who build like industrial machinery, iLogic is certainly the way to go for some of these things. But if you've got one thing in your entire assembly that's configurable, iParts might be useful in that case. But when you start getting like into the hundreds or thousands of parts and stuff, and a lot of those are configurable, I'd start leveraging some other tools in the product.
And in regards to that content center question, we do have a content center productivity training for you, the Streamline customers out there for the month of April here on the third Wednesday of every month here. So for us, the Streamline customers, definitely attend that. It'll be on Content Center. If you aren't a part of Streamline and you're curious about it, please message us in the Zoom chat, and we are more than happy to get you guys going to that one specifically.
Yep. And I just want to reiterate too, is a lot of people are starting to get confused. iParts is not iLogic. They're two completely different things. They just both start with I because they're both kind of like an automation functionality in Inventor. So I just don't want to, not confuse people with that. All right. Can the member name and part number be based on the geometry used in the parts design? For example, can I have that based on a particular length of diameter value? I know you can do that using iLogic because it'll just grab that parameter and name the property that. I'm not 100% sure if you can do that in iParts.
What you can do for that, or maybe a potential workaround, there was a ability inside of the iProperties of your of the custom part that I didn't show. You can go into iProperties of your custom iPart, and you can call out the length or the parameter inside of there instead, and it'll also be in your iProperties location details rather than the name itself, but at least you can specify it that way.
Yep. Answering that second question, if you always put the master part in the assembly to use, do you ever place the member parts anywhere? Those member parts get placed in your workspace, but you don't actually insert those member parts into your assembly, which is why I said if you have a bunch of configurations, might not want to use iParts.
make sure to put those, if you have a network with your other colleagues, make sure that they can see those parts as well, like somewhere on the network drive, so then they can point to that. So then when they open up the assembly, it points to those parts because those are still being referenced.
Yep. Let's take a look. If you dimension the part, does it place the actual value or just the variable height to the fabrication references the table, or is it something that you have to manually edit the annotation for each one? So if you annotate the drawing that Brian did, it will insert the numerical value for that dimension for the particular member he has showing on the screen. So if you need to show a different member, you just change the member that's visible, and then the height will change accordingly, depending on what selections you made for the dimension itself. Hopefully that answers that question. Can you add the variable to show in the dimensions of your drawing? Are you talking about height, or Tony? A little clarification there would be helped. What would happen if you dimension the length of an iPart in a drawing? You get, like I said in the other question, the other answer, you get the actual numerical dimension of that particular member. Yeah. Can you add iParts to a Vault library? It doesn't need to go into Content Center only. You can have iParts in Vault. Like I said, there is a giant white paper on iParts in Vault. I would read that. But yeah, you can put them in Vault. You just have to do it. You have to understand how that works, I think, completely before you even start trying to do so. It can get messy real quick. We have an issue with copy design iParts. They tend to quote unquote break after we perform the copy with Inventor in Vault 2017. I'm not sure what happens when you do a copy design on iParts. I've never tried. So I don't know if that's an intended workflow. Or there's something particular about it, Gage. Let us know what you're seeing, and we can go ahead and take a look at it. How can you manage iParts in Fusion Team? I don't think you can.
I don't think it can point to.
Yeah, because they're all act differently. Yeah. It'd be interesting to know how you're using Fusion Team right now, and what you're doing, and there might be another solution to that. Let us know. Where can I find that iParts in Vault document? If you search iParts iAssemblies Vault in Google, you'll probably find it. Brian, if you just want to use it your second screen to find it and then type it into the chat, that'd be super cool. So Brian's going to go on a journey right now to go find that for us while we're answering more questions. In the context of your examples, can the holes be modified by mathematical equations? Yeah, so parameters can be mathematical equations. They can be based off of other parameters. They can be based off of tables, so on and so forth. So if you make the parameter, say, a dropdown, and it gives you options for the hole diameter, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8, something like that, you can totally have a dropdown to select that. In regards to using Booleans for things like features, right, like turning the fillets on and off, you can't use Booleans in the iPart table, but you can use Booleans when you're using iLogic. So keep that in mind. Would iLogic be more like configurations in SolidWorks? So no. iLogic is kind of like this concept where you can use. It's a little different it's a little more difficult to explain. It's not like configurations in SolidWorks. It's a long conversation mix. So if you want to have that conversation, we can have that conversation. No worries. My email's here on the screen, nigel@bioactive.com, and we can totally have a quick phone call to go over that. I don't want to spend 15 minutes going over what iLogic is. Gauge, iLogic parts is what we use in some of our assemblies. When we copy design the assemblies with those parts is where they break. Gauge, go ahead and give us a ring. We'll go ahead and take a look at that if you want us to. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Is there any observed problem with mixing iParts and iLogic implementation in a Vault workspace? That's super particular. I would do everything in iLogic if possible and have iLogic refer to Excel spreadsheets. That would probably be way easier. Especially with Vault, it starts getting really messy when you start using iParts. You have to be super careful. I personally don't do it, so that is my opinion on that. I'm sure other people might say something else, but yeah. Why are the generated parts needed? If you put a master part in the assembly and in the drawing, you can choose the member used. When you use the generated parts.
So the generate part, actually, when you put it in the assembly, does get generated that's on the same spot or on the spot. So if you take a look back, it's going to be referencing back to the generated part. So that's why we need that generated part, because it needs to reference a part file. But if you didn't generate it like I did in there, eventually when you go to place it in, it will generate as you place it in there.
Yeah, it'll generate in that location because it's referencing something, which is why I tend to use iLogic for this stuff. Because I don't want a bunch of generated parts sometimes. Yeah. If it's like 2 or 3, like Brian showed, it's like not a big deal. But when
it's manageable.
Yeah, it's super manageable. When you get like 50 and you do that on a scale of like 50 different parts, starts to get.
As long as you know it's what you're doing.
Exactly. I think that's the best answer for that. If you're cognizant about what's going on, it makes sense. So Brian got that white paper in the chat. Thank you, Brian. iParts, any updates in 2020? No, but there's been a lot of iLogic updates, I think. So that's a really cool announcement too. That like leads me to the next thing. Inventor, Vault, and AutoCAD 2020 are starting shipment into people's accounts starting yesterday. So I'm going to reiterate that. Inventor, AutoCAD, and Vault 2020 started shipping yesterday into people's accounts. So you might have gotten an email saying, hey, the new version of the product's available to you. You can download it in your account. It hasn't showed up in everyone's account yet. It's actually not in my account yet, which makes me sad. But for those of you who are getting that, go ahead and start downloading and using it if you want to now. We are doing several webinars on what's new in those products for Vault, Inventor, and AutoCAD, and those webinars are starting in 2 weeks, April 11th, with the corresponding product managers from each of those teams. So stay tuned. It's like probably my favorite 3 webinars of the whole year, and I've been doing this for like 3 years. So I guess stay tuned for that to see if there's any iPart stuff in there. Is it possible to tie iParts to drawings to avoid redimensioning a part? I'd use iLogic for that. To iParts. Depending on what you're trying to do, depending on what the dimensions are, I might use iLogic for that. Oh, okay. So Tony is mentioning, can the actual text be shown, or do you just override the dimension and type the variable manually? Yeah, I would just annotate that manually and write height there, or like reference the table or something like that.
And for some of the dimensionings that I was doing earlier, it actually, if you backed out and after I typed in the dimension or the parameter, and you go back in, it actually shows at the top of the little window that pops up that it's a parameter or the name of the parameter. I don't know if that's consistent throughout the entire of all the features, but I know I've seen it before where it shows that the parameter name in there.
Yeah. So there is a chat inside of Zoom as opposed to the questions chat panel, and that's where Brian put that big old link in. So for those of you who can't see it, it's there. Brian, do you just want to re-up that? Just paste it again.
Yeah,
at the bottom
sure.
of there.
See, if you're not getting it, then let us know, because I'm gonna. This is
the second time it's going in.
So,
what's the alternative to using iParts if you're using Vault? It really depends on what you're trying to construct, Jerry. I think that's a conversation best had to determine what method of automation you should use based on what you're trying to build. If it's something super simple, it's like in the scale of like 1 to 10 parts, maybe you can use iParts and Vault. But if you're building like industrial machinery and you're automating, oh, are you like sending that to all? No, you're sending it to all panels, Brian. Change that. Change this. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, it's coming.
My fault.
Boom.
There it is.
All right. So like I was saying, it really depends on what you're automating. For me, I personally use iLogic forms for stuff. It I don't know, it just makes more sense. Let us know what you're trying to build, Jerry, and we can help you, guide you towards the right workflow to do so. But it's a lot more flexible if you're using things like the API and iLogic. You have a lot more ability to manipulate certain parameters and stuff like that. So be really interesting to know what you're building, and then we can figure out what the best method of automating would be. I keep mentioning iLogic. This is just like something that
I was gonna say.
know about. Generally, you say iLogic is better for more complicated parts. Can you talk a bit more about the pros and cons of each? So iLogic, you have like a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can manipulate. When you use the Inventor API, even more so, any button you can click in Inventor pretty much has an API call. So you can do all of that stuff. So when you've got like things where you're turning on and off particular features, or you're manipulating certain parts based on parameters on other parts, and you're like starting to assemble this, I would use iLogic. Brian, we can totally have that conversation offline and kind of go over it. I understand what you guys make over there, so we can totally have that conversation. If you want, go ahead and shoot me an email. Let me know when a good time to give you a ring is, and we can have that conversation. When's 2020 Inventor being released? So like I mentioned, it is releasing into people's accounts right now. Obviously, Autodesk can't just snap their fingers like Thanos and get it to appear or disappear at one time. So I think they're doing it in like alphabetical order. I'm not 100% sure exactly what the methodology is, but I don't have it. And my name starts with an N. So I have no idea what the exact order is. I've seen some of my customers' accounts and they're showing up in there already. So take a look. I think Brian's just going to check his right now and see if he has it. Yeah. So Inventor, Vault, and AutoCAD. So take a look.
I have it.
Wow.
I start with a B.
Yeah, Brian's name starts with a B. Maybe that's why he has it and I don't.
All the Brians might have it. No.
Are the generated parts saved to the master, or are they independent after they're generated? So all of those generated files are saved as like completely separate part files. Completely separate part files from the master. And the master is referencing those files when it puts them in the drawing or assembly.
It's saved in the same folder as the master.
Yeah.
So wherever you save the master, they'll create a new folder with the master's name. There'll be a folder of those parts.
Yep. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and answer a couple questions here from YouTube because Jess is messaging me. So for those of you who are still asking questions, I'm going to give you another minute or so to ask while I'm answering these. And then we'll probably end the webcast. I know there's a ton of questions. If you have anything follow up, our emails are on the screen. Go ahead and email us. Let's see. Gotham has a question. There's a couple of questions. Can you explain key parameters in the iPart table? So I think we explained that parameter or key parameters in a couple of other webinars. It's the same as using a key parameter in like content center parts. Let's see. Do you recommend controlling iParts with iLogic? No, don't mix the two if possible. And can we create a drawing for an active iAssembly the same as we can with an iPart? Yeah, so you do the same thing and you put your iAssembly. iAssembly is the same thing as iParts, except you can turn off certain components or change which components it references, stuff like that. And yeah, you can create drawings off of iAssemblies, no problem. Let's see. I think that's just about it for questions. Like I said, I'll give everyone another 30 seconds or so, but I'm going to go ahead and make some announcements right now. So first, stay tuned for the What's New in Inventor and Vault webinars. Those are happening on the 11th of April and the 18th of April. We are finalizing the scheduling for the AutoCAD one, which should be either the next week or 2 weeks after that. So stay tuned for those as they come up. In addition, anyone who has any more questions beyond iParts in general, go ahead and email myself or Brian. If you have questions about iLogic, go ahead and email myself or Brian. Generally, those lend themselves better to understanding what kind of problem you're trying to solve, and then Brian or I coming up with a solution, whether it's using something like what Brian was showing today, or going a little bit further into the automation spectrum and going into iLogic and stuff. Could you provide a link to other webinars that provide more detail on iParts, iAssemblies, and iLogic? So actually, we have a ton of automation webinars. If you look at our YouTube channel, if you just search Kativ on YouTube, there should be an entire playlist of automation and iLogic. Go ahead and go there. I would say 95% of our videos on automation are iLogic, right, Brian?
Yeah, I actually browsed through yesterday, and I don't know about the exact numbers, but there's a lot of automation on there.
Yeah, and it's almost all iLogic, and that's generally what we prefer to use when it comes to our customers' automation projects. It's just a lot more flexible. So that's where I would go. Also, Autodesk Knowledge Network has a ton of stuff as well, so I would take a look there.
Yeah, if there's any of you guys that have new hirees or new users, if you have Lifeline or Streamline with us, we also have our Jumpstart webinars for Inventor, Vault, AutoCAD every month, second Tuesday of every month.
Yep. So if you have new hires or you have new people showing up, or you're just a new person, and you want to learn more about some of the applications, maybe you've moved from something like SolidWorks, or you moved something like ProE into Inventor or Vault or AutoCAD, and you just want to learn more about some basics and where things are and what things are located, because I think that's the biggest difference, right? Is things in other CAD tools might have the exact same functionality, but are called something completely different. So when you go look for, like, say, for example, if you're a SolidWorks user and you move to Inventor and you're like, I can't mate anything because there's no mate functionality in Inventor. I've gotten that multiple times. It's because it's not called mates. It's called constraints. If you realize the two are exactly the same, then it makes sense. But it's things like that catch a lot of people off guard. When I first started learning Inventor, I was the exact same way. I'm like, where is this, and this? And then I was, referenced, oh, it's just called this, it's called this, it's called this, it's called this. So those are the kind of things that I think are super helpful to start learning.
Yeah, I'll offload that from you guys to us. That's why we have those services or that training.
Yep.
And it's the same training every month. So if you already attended one, if you attend the next one the next month, it's the same one. So don't be too surprised by that.
Yep. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and end for today. We don't have any more further questions. For those of you who maybe I didn't answer your question, it might have lent itself to a bigger conversation. Expect to hear from us. And for those of you who I told to give us a message to have deeper conversations about stuff, a lot of it is like automation in general. I know this is a really huge topic. Go ahead and email us. Our emails are on the screen. Both of our last names suck to type. So take a screenshot and do it that way.
Yeah.
Cool. Again, Brian, I'd like to thank you for being here. Brian sits next to me in the office. I have to see him every day, which is
a joy.
Oh, it's a joy, definitely. I got to see him put it all together, so it's really exciting. So thanks again, Brian, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We will be here next week with our good friend Alex Alvarez, who sits in the snake pit with us here at Kativ Technologies. Everyone have a great weekend and stay safe. Bye.